From this lecture onwards, we're going to talk about the Economic Survey 2016-17. Before starting with the Economic Survey, let's understand the difference between budget as well as the Economic Survey. So, a budget of 2017 has been called as the budget of 2017-18, whereas the Economic Survey has been called as the Economic Survey of 2016-17. So, the Economic Survey relates to 2016-17, whereas the budget relates to 2017-18. Now, why is it done? It's done because of what the budget's targets are and what are the targets of the vision of economic survey. On the one hand, budget tells us from where the government earns revenue. So it is telling us how the government is going to earn revenue and from where. And it also tells us how the government is going to spend this money. So on the one hand, it's telling us from where the government is going to raise money, and on the other hand, it's also telling us how the government is going to spend this money that it has raised from different sources. Therefore, it's called as the budget of 2017-18 because it's talking about the financial year 2017-18. On the other hand, economic survey tells us how the government has performed in the financial year 2016-17. It answers the question how the government has performed in the financial year 2016-17, and it also lays down a vision statement for a long period of time, let's say 20 years. And that's the reason that the economic survey talks about UBI as a potential replacement of social schemes running in India over a long period of time in the next 20 years. So economic survey covers two things. First of all, it tells us how the government has performed in the last 1 year, and it also gives out a vision statement for the next 20 to 30 years. Now, coming to the economic survey's basic facts first, let's talk about the first fact which is given by the economic survey on migration. The economic survey tells us the migration has increased in the year 2016-17 to almost 9 million. That is 90 lakh people migrating from rural to urban areas in 1 year. It also tells us that as compared to the census 2011, the migration has almost doubled. So it's telling us that in the 2011 census, migration was provided as 4.5 million people per year, and it has almost doubled in the last 5 to 6 years. That's a very huge increase in migration. This tells us a lot of things. This tells us that government programs for development of rural areas are not functioning as they should be. This tells us that Pura has been a failure. This tells us that Urban Mission, which was launched by the Modi government in the last 1 year, has been a limited success or has not performed well, because migration is increasing day by day and it has almost doubled in the last 5 years. The second data that is provided by the Economic Survey 2016-17 is that the rating of China internationally has increased from A plus to AA minus, whereas rating of India has stayed the same at triple B minus. Now this is a problem area for India, not because rating of India is below China. This is a problem for India because the debt to GDP ratio or credit to GDP ratio of both the countries has a lot of difference. On the one hand, China's debt to GDP ratio is more than 200%. This means that if its GDP is 100 rupees, then its debt is almost a double of the GDP. So it has a debt which is almost double of GDP. On the other hand, India's debt to GDP ratio is almost 70%. So this tells us a lot of things about the financial capabilities as well as the financial strength of India with respect to China. So this rating which has been done of India and China tells us that something is wrong with the rating agencies. The rating agencies are not taking the right factors in mind while deciding their ratings. The third fact which has been given by the economic survey is that poor targeting and allocation of social programs in India. So it tells us that the poorest 40% of districts have only got 29% of central funds. So it tells us a lot about poor targeting of social programs. Poorest of the districts in the country are already getting very low central funds, which means that the poorest of the districts are becoming more and more poor. The next fact that the economic survey brings out is that 7 taxpayers for every 100 voters. This is very less compared to international standards. There are only 7 taxpayers when we compare them with the voters that they are in the country. So voters, as you know, are people above 18 years of age, 18 and plus, and out of that only 7 people are paying taxes. So this is a horrible fact, and this also tells us lot of tax evasion and lot of black money being generated in the economy. The next fact provided by the Economic Survey 2016-17 is regarding property tax. The Economic Survey says that property tax in India has been collected only up to 5 to 20% of the potential of property taxes. It also tells us that cities like Bangalore and Jaipur, which are one of the biggest cities in the country, are collecting between 5 to 20%. This means that other areas are collecting even less than this potential. So this tells us that property tax collection is also very less than the potential that the property tax collection has in the country. The next data is very important. It tells us that the economic survey has projected a growth rate of 6.75% to 7.5% post demonetization. It's important to remember that it's post demonetization for the year 2017-18. It gives a window of 0.75% and the range is from 6.75% to 7.5%. Now, a direct question can be asked in the examination, in the RBI examination, as to what is the growth range that has been projected by the economic survey. It's 0.75%, and it can also ask us as to what is the range given by the economic survey for 2017-18. It's 6.75% to 7.5%. These numbers are directly asked in the exam, so it's important to remember them. The next fact that is brought out by the economic survey 2016-17 is regarding inflation. The economic survey tells us about inflation, that the CPI and WPI headline inflations are coming closer and closer. We'll be talking about the reasons for this wide gap between CPI and WPI inflation when we talk about the inflation in a particular chapter in the economic survey. But right now it's important to remember that there was an anomaly due to which the CPI headline and WPI headline inflation had experienced a wide gap, which is now being eliminated, and they're coming closer and closer. Now, as all of you know, inflation is a reduction in the purchasing power of a person. It's a rise in prices of goods and services which results in a fall in the purchasing power of a person. The economic survey is telling us that in quarter 3 of 2016-17, the inflation has come in very stable range of 3 to 4%, and this lies very well between the targets decided by the Monetary Policy Committee last year. So it's in a very stable and a very suitable range right now, but there was an anomaly almost 1 year ago, and we'll be talking about that anomaly. So the economic survey brings out this anomaly through this graph. The next fact that the economic survey brings out is regarding the agriculture, forestry and fishing sector. So it tells us that the agriculture industry has been doing very well in the last 1 year. So the advanced estimates given by the economic survey tells us that the growth has increased to 4.1% of GDP, which is very high for the agriculture sector in India. This means lower farmer deaths. This means lower farmer deaths for a country like India, which has been very high in the past 10 years. This also means lower debt default by the farmers, because if the farmers are able to earn a lot of money through their agriculture activity, this means less debt default by the farmers and therefore less work for the bankers. So it's a good news for all the bankers, because bankers don't have to run behind the farmers in order to generate the money, or in order to recoup the money which has been given to the farmers. So the agriculture sector has performed very well in the past 1 year. That's what the economic survey is telling us. The next fact that the economic survey brings about is concerning the GDP growth rate in India at constant prices. We've already talked about the meaning of constant prices, basic prices, and market prices when we talked about macroeconomics. In this lecture, we're going to limit ourselves to the facts brought about by the economic survey. So, the economic survey says that the Indian economy has grown at a rate of 7.1% in the year 2016-17 as per advanced estimates. So right now the advanced estimates are available. After some time we will have provisional estimates, and then we'll have the real estimates coming out. It also brings out the rates of growth of Indian economy in the year 2017-18 at 6.75% to 7.5%. I've already talked about this. So it says that although the Indian economy has grown lesser than the year 2015-16 by 0.5%, it is expected to grow faster in the range of 6.75 to 7.5%, and the reason for that is demonetization. It brings out the fact that demonetization had a sharp impact on the economic growth of the economy, and post demonetization, the benefits of demonetization are going to increase the economic growth of the country. The next fact brought about by the economic survey is concerning the fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP. We've already talked about the meaning of fiscal deficit in macroeconomics. So the economic survey says that fiscal deficit in the year 2016-17 has been only 3.5% of GDP. Now, as you can see, the fiscal deficit has been consistently going down. What this is called is fiscal consolidation. So the government is very strict on fiscal consolidation. It has been trying to reduce its fiscal deficit, not by just reducing its expenditure but also by increasing its revenues. So the government is trying to increase its revenues and also trying to decrease the non-required or unrequired expenditures which the economy is bearing right now. So the fiscal deficit has reduced consistently over the last 4 years, and it has come down to 3.5% in the year 2016-17 as per the economic survey. The next fact brought about by the economic survey is concerning the current account balance. The economic survey says that the current account balance has reduced to just zero point 0.1 minus 0.1% of GDP. Now, this is a very good news for India, and the reasons for them have both been the strength of Indian economy and global reasons like a fall in oil prices and a fall in import of gold in the economy. So these two have been the major reasons of a fall in current account, negative current account balance. The chart here tells us about the current account balance in US billion dollars. So this can also be asked in the exam. The exam will not just ask you about current account balance in terms of percentage. It can also give you numbers and ask you what is the current account balance of India in the last 1 year. So in 2016-17, as per the economic survey, it's 3.7 billion US dollars in negative. So this is a very important fact that has been brought about by the economic survey 2016-17.